Well, good afternoon YouTubers. My name's Jeff and this is my first YouTube review, and effectively I'm going to do it on two bikes I own. And the reason I'm going to review both bikes is a bit of a tale really, but I'll start with the first bike, which is my Boardman MX race, which I've had for about 2 years, and I've done about 3,500 miles on that, and it's been a good bike. But the reason I'm going to do a review is because earlier this year I decided I was actually going to stand up my car for a year and just cycle to work every day of the week, which is about 7.5 miles away. Maybe because I wanted to lose some weight and get fitter, which I have. Of course, because I was standing my car up, I didn't want to be dependent on just one bike. So luckily my employer runs a very good cycle to work scheme, and I started looking around to decide which bike I fancied. So I was searching YouTube for reviews of different Boardmans and other bikes which would be available to me in the cycle to work scheme, and I decided I quite like the look of the Boardman MX Comp, which is sort of the next one up from the race. A bit more expensive, and I found, apart from the Halfords reviews on YouTube, which are pretty much all of a muchness and telling you how wonderful everything is, there are only two other reviews of the MX Comp on YouTube, one of which was basically a guy saying how shiny his bike was and how pretty. Well, we can all see they're shiny and pretty. And another one with a guy, and don't get me wrong, I'm not running these two down, but the other guy waffled on a bit and seemed more interested in showing what was in his shed than actually talking about anything sensible to do with the bike. It's obvious that neither of the two reviewers had really done any mileage on them or used them at that point when they made a review, so as far as reviews went, they were pretty useless to me. So I'm hoping that this short review will be a bit more informative for you if you're thinking of buying a Boardman, and I can just give you a few observations of my experiences with both of them. So I'll start with the race, the black and white one. When I bought that, obviously it was completely standard. I collected it from Halfords a year and a half ago, and it was been, air quotes, built by Halfords, and nothing specifically wrong with the way it had been assembled. However, none of it was adjusted that well. So when I got the Comp, I got that in a box and assembled that myself, and consequently it runs much better than it might otherwise have done. Anyway, the race, the black one, when it came, it actually had the standard saddle on it, just white thing. You see it's a bit worn out in the front now. The saddle was excruciating really, good for about 10 miles. After that, 30-45 mile rides, it was just excruciating. I ended up standing on the pedals more than I was actually sitting in the saddle. So that got junked and replaced with a Brook saddle, which they're fairly expensive, relative, isn't it? But I think around about £70 that cost. But it was a gift from the wife anyway one Christmas, and beautiful. Anyway, I'd swapped the saddle, of course. So imagine that had the brown Brook saddle on. That was good. But I found fairly quickly that I kept buckling the rear wheel, and I'm a big bloke, I'm quite heavy, I'm over 20 stone, and the 32 spoke, I've got one here actually, the 32 spoke engineered for performance, or E4P as they like to call it, standard wheels, for someone of my size and what I was doing, they're just not up to the job. I think if you're an average weight, probably under 10 stone, then they're probably adequate if you're not too rough for them. But the original wheels off the black and white one, the rims split and they were forever buckling, and I'm good at truing wheels. It wasn't that I was over tightening spokes, but basically they're just not really up to it. So on that bike I put some 36 spoke wheels, much stronger. They're actually dual purpose. If you look at the rims, you can see that they're actually milled for rim brakes, and the hubs are fitted for discs. but I'll come back to the brakes in a while. So there we go on that one. I've changed the wheels, much better. I swapped out the original Smolby Tarago tyres, which are these ones. They're Kevlar reinforced, and they're reasonably puncture resistant actually, provided you run them quite hard, but they didn't wear well for me. I think I was wearing them out every 400 or 500 miles. Not that it really matters, you don't really need the tread if you're doing you know, a mix of road and cycle paths and fairly smooth tracks, but you know, I like to see my tyres lasting, so I actually put Smolby Marathon Pluses on, much harder wearing, and the ones that's on the black and white MX race now, I think they've done about 1,500 miles, and they're not appreciably worn, and they're very good. I have had one puncture which may have actually been deliberate by somebody else, but I won't go into that. So they're very good. The group set on the black and white one is 27 speed, FSA front chain set, and SRAM X5 on the rear. Now that's not the original black one. The original black X5 rear mech basically wore out. In fact, the front one on that one's fairly worn, so I'd upgraded the wife's bike and I pinched that off. When I upgraded that again, I pinched the X5 off that, but it's good, adequate. The original KMC chain, the 9-speed chain on that, lasted for about 3,200 miles before I changed it for a SRAM 9-speed, which snapped in 200 miles. So the chain that's on that is now a KMC 9-speed because, well, from experience, they're strong. There's not much more to say about that one really, apart from that you can see that I've also put Shimano SPD pedals on. I went clipless a while ago because I was increasing my mileage, and I found I was getting some Achilles pain, and I found that's helped a lot actually, using decent shoes. Specialised cadets I use for those. Other points about that? One thing I love about the Boardmans is I'm always riding luggaged up because I commute to work, and the frames all, as far as I'm aware, all of them are able to take racks and mud guards. I cocked up a bit with the rack on that one. I bought a disc brake specific rack, and the Boardmans don't need it because the rear disc caliper is actually inboard, so I didn't make that mistake with the new silver one. So anyway, front forks on that one, Suntour NEX mechanical lockout. They've been alright, they're not brilliant. 63mm travel, which you know, if you have anything mildly bumpy and you're heavy like I will, all that travel will be used, but they're alright. I tend to ride with both of them when I use them locked out. In fact, so solid. So unless I've got a camera on one, in which case, you know, the softness is handy. Anyway, that's that one. That's the race. 3,200 odd miles. Been very reliable. Good strong frame. As Health would say, signature smooth welding. It's very nice. Although one of the other reviewers did criticise the welding on the comp, but I'll come to that a bit later. So anyway, that's that one. So, main difference between the comp and the race is the front forks on the comp are, I think they have a hydraulic lockout on the top, which you can see just there. It looks, for all intents and purposes, looks the same as the other one, but I think it's possibly more efficient now. Not much to say about that. The lockout works. If you switch it on, if you switch it off, you have suspension travel. The only thing I can really add to that is that blue cap, several times when I've had the forks locked, when I unlock them or open them, so I have suspension travel available, the first time I hit a bump, that blue handle pops off under pressure. So somewhere a little bit of air is being pumped out of the right fork, which I think only contains the lockout. I don't think there's a spring in the right hand fork of these. So a bit of air pressure is being generated and that, and it's just popping the cap off. So I figured I'll drill a small hole in that and then see if that stops it, just to relieve the pressure. Front forks able to take full mud guards, same as the rear of the bike, which is lovely, because they're Axiom guards. A bit fiddly to fit possibly, but they're really good. I've done about 500 miles on the comp, and I've had no issues with the guards at all, and I've stayed dry when it's been wet, so I'm really pleased with them. A bit under 30 quid I think. As you can see, I've straight away swapped out the wheels. The E4P 32 spoke rims that came with the comp have never been on the road. I took them straight off, swapped them out with the 36 spoke wheels from Halfords. It cost about 90 quid for the two, but you know, that's money well spent. They've no problems with those, no issues at all. The chain set and group set on the comp is, they call it SRAM Via Centro. 20 speed, 2 chain rings on the front, and a let's move the camera slightly, 10 speed cassette on the back. The 10 speed chain, also 10 speed chains, KMC, same as came standard on the other one. I've got no reason to think that's going to give me any problems. The derailleur, again SRAM Via Centro, long cage. The indexing is really good. Actually, what I should mention is that the indexing on both bikes is not necessarily improved, but stays completely reliable and accurate if you keep the cables really clean and well lubricated. As soon as they get any crud on the cables, they can start getting a bit finicky. But the indexing on this is fabulous. Actually, takes a bit of getting used to. The ratios are much they're much more even. They say they're optimized for hybrid bikes apparently, but the difference in gearing between each ratio is almost equalized across the range. So I found that on the MX race there were some quite big steps between a couple of the ratios. It's much easier, much nicer on the comp. The MX race, that one, I think the highest gear, the fastest gear if you like, was 48 teeth on the front chainring and 11 on the rear. Now on the comp I think it's still 48 on the front chainring, but it's actually 12 on the rear. So you would think that on paper, being slightly lower geared, the comp would be slower. Now I don't know why this would be, but in fact I'm finding I'm riding much faster. That could be that my fitness just continues to increase, or it could be in fact that getting up there on the optimized ratios, getting up to sort of a quicker speed is easier, so perhaps it's easier to actually maintain it. So I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on the intricacies of gearing as such, but my average speed was immediately about 1.5 mile an hour faster going to work over about 8 miles. So I really like it. I do really like that SRAM Via Centro. Again, on the back of the bike you can see that the frame is able to take 3-point rack system, rack mountings, which is good, and full mud guards, Axiom mud guards, as I said earlier. Very, very good, really like them. The rack itself is Toe Peak, I think it's a Toe Peak DX Explorer. Very, very good. Got a bag to go with it, and they've got a nice rail mounting system, so you slide the bag on, it stays nice and secure, then clips on, so there's no farting around with bungee straps or anything. And it's literally a second to put it on, second to get it off. Cracking, really good. Moving up slightly, as I said earlier, Brooks saddle, very comfortable. Wouldn't be with anything else now. Underneath the saddle, it's just a cheap old bag. I took the proper mounting off it and just cable tied it up under there, but that's fine. In that I've got a tube, some tools, and my waterproof trousers. A couple of bottle holders couple of Boardman bottles just because they're alright. I wasn't being snobby about it or anything, or precious, or just I like the black bottles. And the two red objects are CO2 canisters for a CO2 pump, Bontrager Road, Air Rush Road, I think. But I'll show you that in a minute. I'll get a bit closer. So from there we'll go to the brakes. So I'll just switch the video off, go and turn the bike around so you can see the brakes. Okay, I'll swap them around now so we can see the braking side of things. Now we'll go back to the MX Race for a minute, the black and white one. Originally, when that came out of the factory, it was fitted with Avid's BB5 or ball bearing 5 mechanical brakes, which I persevered with for a couple of thousand miles, but they were always noisy. Didn't matter how well or how carefully you adjusted and serviced them, they were always noisy. And when you put the brakes on, applied the brakes, the discs would make a sort of an odd spangling noise, almost as if something was touching the spokes as the wheel went round. That sort of dinging noise. So what I actually did was chuck those in a bin and replace them with some Shimano M355 hydraulic brakes and Shimano discs to go with them. So in fact, these white ones you're looking at now used to be on the MX Race. Very good. The modulation, the feel of them is very nice. It's felt much better straight away than the mechanical ones. So of course, being hydraulic, you're not using a cable. The feel through the levers is nicer and progressive and smooth, and there's no noise. They're twin opposed piston calipers. So when you first put them on, if you set them up fairly carefully to start with, they just stay silent. They're lovely. I really like them, and at the moment they're dead cheap. Being an older model, they're very cheap. So anyway, they were on the Race, and when I bought the MX Comp home, it came with these, which are Avid calipers, hydraulic again, and exactly the same discs that were originally on the Race, which is those Avids. And I just didn't like them. I've done about 500 miles so far, but 300 of those I did with the Avid brakes, and they're always noisy. Didn't matter how you adjusted the caliper. They're still twin opposed pistons, I think, but one or other of the pads would still sit slightly against the rotor, and perhaps it's just me, but I don't like unnecessary mechanical noise and rubbing noises. So they came off the MX Comp and they went on to the MX Race, which is obviously now my spare bike, and I put my cheap Shimano calipers and brake levers and discs onto the Comp, and I have to say I love them. They're really good. They're absolutely silent. They work just as well. In fact, possibly even better. Maybe that's something to do with the pattern of the discs themselves, the disc rotors. But I'm very, very happy with them. In a second, I'll pop the camera off and put it on a pod and walk around and show you the lever side of things. So I'll put the camera on a pod. We'll get a bit closer, have a better closer look now, because by now some of you will probably quite fairly say, "Get on with it, you're waffling." Quick point about well, I think it's a hydraulic lockout on these. Is that it's very simple to operate actually on the face of it. Open, which means you have suspension available, the forks will spring up and down. Locked, solid. It's very simple in theory. In practice, when you are on the road and you decide that you're going to lock the forks, reaching down to this lever takes a bit of practice really. It's easy to wobble, so just be aware of that. Okay, these are the levers, the Avid levers, which come as standard on the MX Comp, although here you can see that they're fitted to the MX Race. Bleeding them is not difficult really. Just in there is a single bleed point into which you push a syringe. I won't go through the procedure, but it's not that difficult, although these aren't as well designed in my opinion as the Shimano's, and adjusting lever travel is via that 2 or 3 mil Allen bolt there. So that's that. The Shimano's on the other hand, I think look better. I'm not particularly precious about such things. Scratch that there. They feel better. I think they look better. They're definitely better designed. Bleed point there on the top rather than the end, which makes that much easier to bleed. You can literally turn that up level, pop that out while you're doing the gubbins down the bottom end, stick your filler, a bottle on that. It's easy. Right, a quick note about the signature smooth welded welds. Well, they're not smooth welds when they're welded. They're the tubes are butted together, welded normally. Then these are actually sanded down, mechanically sanded down, to give you that smoothness, and it is lovely. It looks great. Now that's the front head, and on the seat tube here, see we've got exactly the same. It is lovely. Now, dropping down, one of the other reviewers made a particular point about criticising the weld around the bottom bracket. Now, I think his criticism was unfair really, because if you remove any metal from that weld, it can make the weld, it can lose some strength from the weld. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm stood on the pedals going up a hill, putting some real power in, I actually want all of this to be as strong as it possibly can. So it bothers me not one jot that I can see a weld. In fact, if anything goes wrong with that weld, I think it's probably easier to see a crack in that lot than not. But I don't mind that at all. I really don't mind that. This is the air rush pump I was telling you about. I won't go on about it too much. Works really well. Allows you to get about 40 psi of carbon dioxide into the tyres quite quickly. But as I've said, with these Schwalbe Marathon Plus tyres on, you shouldn't really be getting many punches, so it's not really a massive issue. Quickly just show you the fixing points of the rack. You have 2 points, one each side the tube there, and a bit lower down you have the other rack fixing point there, and behind the quick release skewer you can just about see in there the fixing point for the rear mudguards. So I think it's really well designed. As I mentioned earlier, the rear caliper sits inboard of the frame, so the black rack that I put there, you can see it pokes out. You don't need that type of rack with Boardmans with inboard brakes. It's just unnecessary. You can see this rack fits much flusher to the line of the bike, which is good. I don't care about wind resistance as much, but some of you may. Right, so these are the calipers that actually do come on the MX Comp Avids, and just turn that round a bit. And as I've already said, I'm not a real fan of them actually. That's the bleed point. Effectively, to bleed them, you just pop that out, screw a syringe in with brake fluid in it. These take .4, you know, I think top proper, like same fluid you use in your car. And then to bleed these, actually I had to turn the bloody lever around. It's a bit of a rigmarole compared to the Shimano's, so I'm just not going to get into it. I don't like them. That's that. What else can I point out about the bike itself? Not much really. I can show you the pretty stickers on this. On some of the stays, the chain stays, it's got stickers and stuff, but MX Comp, Dynamic Ride Concept, 3XB, whatever the hell that means. And down there, a direct power transfer. Well, yeah, it's got a chain on it. Well, we're pretty much there really. I suppose I could bore you slightly with some other stuff. Oh yes, I know. I know what I haven't shown you. Out of the box, the comp comes with these lovely white things, which, well, you can see not a bit of dirt on them because they came straight off. And these what were these? These were ergons, and they're sort of ergonomic type grips. I find them very comfortable. Okay, I'm waffling about stuff I've done now, and I've rather than the bike, but toe peak bar end mirrors, I find them really good. I only tend to use the right one really, but they're very nice. Just get them in the right place. They're very comfortable as bar ends. I do like those. Crane copper bell. I'll show you a quick difference there. This is a pretty average dinger. Not brilliant. Does the job. Does the job. Whereas the crane, on the other hand, it's much nicer. A bit of a crowded dashboard I've got here really. I use Cree lights, which could burn out the CCD in my camera. They are incredibly bright, and they light up the world in front of you a treat. Camera mount for a Garmin Virb camera. Used to use a little Polaroid, but I much prefer the Garmin Virb, and the mount for my GPS. Oh, sod it. I'll put it all on there. You can see what it looks like. Hang on. Okay, so now I'm probably doing what that other reviewer did, which I criticised him for, which is waffling about everything but about the bike itself. But so now we're sort of turning to a super review. But anyway, I've got a bit of a crowded dashboard. The underbars on this. Bell we've done. Light we've done. This is my Garmin Virb Elite camera. It's GPS type camera. Coming to that in a minute. And this is my Garmin GPSmap 62S, which actually I primarily use for walking when we're up, we do some mountain walking. However, it has some very useful function on a bicycle. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this in this light, but basically I use it as a bike computer. Obviously it does my speed, shows elevation, my cadence. I've got a Garmin cadence sensor, or RPM, how fast I'm pedalling, and all the other crap on there. Plus, of course, get the map back. It's fairly good for navigation or just wandering around, recording GPX tracks of where I've been, etc, etc. And it also has a Garmin Virb remote control on it, so it can control this camera. No point where it is here, but if I had the camera on the back of the bike facing somewhere else, or on my helmet, I don't need to take my hands off the bars and fart around. I can actually use the GPS to control the camera, which is quite funky really. As far as action cams go, it's small, it's fairly unobtrusive, people don't really notice it, which is good. Also, it does a variety of films in a variety of formats and speeds. You can do 100 frames a second slow motion, not much good if you want to film a long thing. 50 frames a second in 720p, or 30 frames per second in full 1920 by 1080p, which is quite nice. I'll splice some video in to show you that. But also, the thing I really like about the Virb is that the Elite, this one, is GPS enabled, so it will store GPX files with the video file, and using a free editor you can create a video which actually shows your ride data. That's it really. I suppose I could just switch that on. Hello, that's me. Yeah, I think that will probably do. So, hope you haven't got too bored. I have ended up waffling, sorry about that. There we go.